This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
One kidnapped Nigerian student dies as the military rescues 7 people from militants. Uganda imposes a total lockdown in the latest measures to stop rising COVID-19 infections. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres sworn in for a second term in office. Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us. This is Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in business, Egypt's central bank holds benchmark rates for the 5th straight month. And in sports, South African long jumper Luvo Manyonga handed 4-year ban for anti-doping rule violation. We begin the top of the hour in Nigeria with an update on the plight of at least 80 students kidnapped from Kebbi State. The army says one of the kidnapped students has died. The female student was found dead as troops tracked the kidnappers. The army spokesperson Onyema Nwachukwu added that 5 students and 2 teachers had been freed. They were rescued after troops exchanged gunfire with the abductors.
In the last few hours, we've come across the kidnappers. They came to our blocking point, and we've engaged them early hours of this morning. At that point, they have abandoned 5 of the students and 1 of the teachers. Unfortunately, I think we've lost one of the students.
I want to raise a song to praise my God for keeping us alive and also for giving me the courage to withstand whatever is going on, because my husband is one of the kidnappers that they went with.
Well, for more on that story, let's get now more now from Phil Ihaza in Abuja. Phil, what is the latest on that kidnapping, and also under what circumstances did the student die?
Well, thanks, Mahia. What we know is that at least 7 of them have been rescued, including 2 teachers. We also know that the military, of course, with close air support from the Nigerian Air Force, were able to trail the criminals in the bush as they escorted the abducted students and teachers to a very remote location. They were in 2 groups, and one other group was also escorting some herd of cattle, but the military were able to engage in a gun battle, and they were able to rescue 7 of the abductees and also rescue the cattle, which is understandably so, because they would have abandoned the cattle to try to continue to run with the students. But the military say they are still in hot pursuit of these criminals. That we know that the female student who died, so far what we know is that she died out of exhaustion, after being rescued. But the remaining of these released students or rescued abductees are currently in a medical facility in Kebbi State, and they are receiving treatment. And also the military say they are still in pursuit of the criminals to try to recover or rescue the remaining abducted students and teachers.
All right, Phil, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on those developments. CGTN's Phil Ihaza joining us live from Abuja, Nigeria. On to East Africa now, where Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has imposed stringent measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. They include a total lockdown banning the movement of people, public and private vehicles. Only essential workers will be exempted from the restrictions. This comes at a time that the country is experiencing a second wave of infections and the spread of the Delta strain of the virus. Museveni also confirmed on Friday's televised address that coronavirus cases in Uganda have risen from an average of just 100 every day to 1,700 daily. Well, for more on this story, let's now cross over to Michael Baleke in Kampala. Thank you, Michael, for joining us. Tell us more about the new measures announced by the president.
Hello, Mahia. The new measures that took effect, that is last night, that's Friday night, include a ban on public and private transport, schools, higher institutions of learning, places of worship, entertainment places and sports events will remain closed. Barriers are restricted to only close family members, and these have to be less than 20. And night curfew will also begin at 7 and end at 5:30 a.m. This is local time. All these restrictions, Mahia, will remain effective for 42 days. However, there are exceptions for public and private cars to carry the sick to hospitals, and cargo trucks and motorcycles also carrying cargo will be allowed to operate. Shops in much of downtown Kampala will remain closed, but of course groceries within the areas, residential areas, will operate. The international airport has also remains open to allow tourists to move in and out of the country. Mahi?
Michael, this isn't the first time this has happened. Uganda has, of course, imposed various restrictions before, including those announced by the president just barely 2 weeks ago. Why have those measures not been successful in slowing down infections there?
That is true, Mahia. Uganda has been in a partial lockdown, actually, which was announced about 2 weeks ago. People were allowed to move, but they could not cross in other regions. For example, you could not move from Kampala to a region just outside Kampala. And the president, in his speech, noted that this has not stopped the number of people who are going, the number of infections from going up. We're talking about 1,700 new infections daily. In the last few days, we had about 3 days, we had more than 10,000 cases coming up. And these are only the people who were tested. But there are many out there that do not have the money to test. The president says that the country was running short of medical supplies. And if this trend continued in the next 1 month, the health system would have collapsed. We have already been seeing people dying because oxygen has run out of hospitals, and they have had to turn to private, for example, steel manufacturers to support, to come with support oxygen production, so that some people that need hospitalization can also get oxygen. So on his basis of a full lockdown is to prevent more infections by reducing community transmissions, but also to manage the already sick people and those that need quick medical attention. Mahi.
Right. Thank you very much for those updates. Michael Baleke joining us live from Kampala, Uganda. Moving on, South Africa is struggling with a third wave of COVID-19. There's been a massive spike in new infections in the past week. The country's vaccination rollout has also been slow, with only 2 million people having received their jabs since the rollout began in February. And as Sumitra Naidu reports, the Africa CDC has pledged more support for the country and other African nations as they battle the pandemic.
Most of the US and Europe are far ahead with vaccinations, with some countries even moving towards minimal restrictions, including lifting the compulsory wearing of masks in public places. Africa, though, is lagging behind. USAID is stepping in to assist with vaccines. US President Joe Biden pledged 500 million Pfizer vaccines to the African Union and other members of the UN-backed COVAX initiative, which includes 92 countries.
We are also actively consulting with the Africa CDC and the AU on the distribution of 80 million vaccine doses that were previously announced. So far, the total U.S. vaccine dose donations to 580 million doses globally, between the sharing of U.S. vaccines and the purchase of the new Pfizer vaccines. And that builds, of course, on $2 billion that the U.S. had already announced as a contribution to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, for the COVAX platform.
But there's been a sudden rise in new infections across the continent. In the last week, COVID cases surged 45%, near the 1 million mark, with over 1,400 deaths reported.
As a continent today, we have recorded 5 million cases of COVID-19 across the continent, with a mortality number of 136,000 people. What is unique with this pandemic in Africa is that several countries, as we speak, about 15 of them are racing towards the third wave, and a couple of them actually are moving into the fourth wave. I believe strongly that we have the solutions to win this battle in our hands. if we do three things: if we really show and exercise global cooperation, if we exercise greater coordination, and if we show greater solidarity.
Unfortunately, it won't be as clear-cut. Getting vaccines on the ground will be a race against time.
There are several criteria that will be used when we begin to get those vaccines, that we rushing vaccines into those 15 countries speedily. If you look at the Southern Africa region, they are heading towards a winter season, and with the winter arriving there, there's a risk that the numbers will increase because of indoors activities.
In the meantime, South Africa has deployed military medics to assist in Gauteng, the economic hub of the country, also the province with the highest number of infections. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, the World Health Organization's Africa Regional Office has warned of a surge in COVID-19 cases across the continent. New data from the WHO indicates more than 120,000 cases were recorded in the month of June alone. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moi reports.
The World Health Organization says Africa's COVID-19 cases are rising by over 20% every week. Current statistics indicate that the DRC, Namibia and Uganda have passed their second wave peaks.
We've now surpassed 5 million COVID-19 cases in Africa, and 136,000 people sadly have died. After 4 weeks of consecutive increases, Africa's third wave is surging upward and accelerating fast. New cases continent-wide are up by nearly 30% in the past week, and deaths are up by 15%.
Africa is now reportedly in the midst of a full-blown third wave.
At the continental level, we're seeing a rise in cases similar to the first wave peak in July 2020, and about 50% of the second wave peak in January 2021. 5 countries account for 76% of the new cases: South Africa with 43%, followed by Tunisia, Zambia, Uganda, and Namibia.
The worrying trajectory of surging cases has now forced many countries to act. WHO says it's supporting countries to review and implement plans to tackle the resurgence of cases down to the district and local levels. 19 million easy-to-use antigen detection rapid diagnostic tests are being shipped to 39 African countries. The shipment is expected to aid the expansion of access to COVID-19 tests. WHO is also working with countries to ship samples for sequencing to better understand where and to what degree variants are circulating in specific contexts. So far, the Delta variant has been reported in 14 African countries. On a positive note, Africa's vaccine rollout is reportedly picking up speed, with over 5 million doses administered in the past 5 days. Almost 12 million people are now fully vaccinated, but this is still less than 1% of Africa's population. According to the World Health Organization, the rise in cases and death is a wake-up call for countries to scale up vaccination in order to reach priority groups and respond to community concerns. Daniel Arap-Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Right, let's get more on that story now. We're now joined by Dr. Tierno Balde. He is the Deputy Incident Manager for COVID-19 Emergency Response for the WHO Regional Africa Office. Dr. Africa initially experienced a low number of infections and deaths, but the situation now seems to be changing. Just how bad is the situation on the continent?
Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, indeed, for the consecutive past 4 weeks, we have really seen quite an important increase in number of COVID-19 cases and also deaths for about 28%. And this is disseminated in many countries, but notably in the Southern African countries. I mean, countries around South Africa. I'm talking here about Zambia, Namibia, or also Uganda. So the situation is really quite concerning. We are monitoring the situation in those countries, but at the meantime, also in 10 other countries, including countries from Central African sub-region. I'm talking here about the DRC, but also in other countries in West Africa. So we have seen this increasing number of cases due to different factors. As you know, there is this circulation of these new variants, but also the fatigue of the communities, for adopting these public health and social measures. But efforts are ongoing really for trying to address these different challenges, including through the vaccination of the people.
And Dr. Africa has faltered in administering vaccines, and the WHO is concerned that help seems to be coming too late. What can Africa then do to improve its vaccination campaigns?
Yes, we are encouraging really different member states in Africa for procuring additional vaccines, but also to organize the vaccination better in the countries. We have seen, some difficulties, some challenges for getting some of these operational funds, to support the rolling out of the vaccine. We have also seen, a limited engagement of the different communities for going and looking for the vaccines. So those are elements which are really important. If you are able to bring those two elements together, I do think that we'll be able to accelerate the vaccination in our region. So getting more vaccine, but also really taking all of the different measures for explaining, encouraging the communities and the people, the population, for going and looking for the vaccine. Those are really key elements, but at the meantime, really, there are different other actions that we might need to do, like in terms of clinical case management for treating the patients, but also encouraging people whenever they are sick to stay at home and really adopting the public health and social measures.
All right, Dr. Tiano Balde, thank you very much for joining us from Brazzaville.
My pleasure.
Moving on, the World Health Organization is awaiting an independent review of an Italian study indicating that COVID-19 could have been in circulation in the country as early as September 2019. The findings will form part of its investigations into the origins of the outbreak. Hermione Kitson spoke with scientists in Tuscany at the forefront of the study.
This Siena laboratory could play a crucial role in determining the chronology of COVID-19.
This opened a door in the research for early circulation of the new coronaviruses.
In collaboration with the Milan Cancer Institute, researchers tested 1,000 blood samples from healthy volunteers in a lung cancer screening trial.
What we found is unexpected because we found some antibodies in a serum sample from 2019, in particular starting from September, October 2019.
Most positive samples were from the region of Lombardy, Italy's first lockdown region, but researchers say the results question when the virus first emerged rather than where.
We do not say that the Wuhan strain was already circulating in Italy, but what we found is the antibodies. So what we can say is that maybe a similar virus was already circulating in Italy before.
The WHO requested the results be retested by an independent laboratory in the Netherlands. Their report is due by the end of the year. It's part of a body of evidence that COVID-19 was in circulation months before Italy's first clinical case in February 2020.
And what happened after our research? Several research groups started to search for the virus, not only for the antibodies.
There are two notable studies by Milan University, one which diagnosed a 25-year-old woman retrospectively after her skin biopsy of November 10, 2019 was retested, and another which diagnosed a 4-year-old boy after his throat swab, also of November 2019, was re-examined, while environmental research, such as wastewater sampling, found traces of the virus in December 2019.
I believe that the WHO delegates, if they merge everything, probably we will have a more clear picture of the origin.
As investigations continue into the start of Italy's COVID crisis, its recovery continues. There's been a steep decline in both the infection rate and the daily death toll, allowing restrictions across the country to be eased.
Scientists say there are many pieces of the puzzle yet to be found. In the meantime, tourists are once again filling the country's famous piazzas. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Siena.
Meanwhile, China's vaccine rollout is surging ahead. Health officials say on the mainland, more than 966 million COVID-19 jabs administered as of Thursday, with over 21 million given on that day alone. Meanwhile, the mainland reported 6 new locally transmitted cases, all in Guangdong province on Friday, with another 24 imported infections. Now, apart from vaccinating its own people, China has provided vaccine aid to over 80 countries and 4 international organizations. It's also exported vaccines to more than 40 countries while cooperating with more than 10 nations in research, development and production. China has pledged to provide an initial batch of 10 million vaccines to COVAX, and despite huge domestic demand, it has altogether provided more than 350 million doses of its COVID-19 vaccines overseas. Both the Sinopharm and Sinovac vaccines have been approved by the World Health Organization for emergency use. You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. It's time for us to take a short break. Here's what's coming up when we return. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres sworn in for a second term in office. And Iran state media says Ebrahim Raisi has won the presidential election.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's head to Iran now, where state media says Ebrahim Raisi has won the presidential election based on early results. As vote counting is still underway, our correspondent Ehsan Kevani reports from Tehran on the latest results so far.
According to official reports, 90% of the votes have been counted, and out of almost 28.6 million ballots, Raisi won 17.8 million votes, while the other rival Rezai was second with 3.3 million. Hemmati got third with 2.4 million, and Ghazizadeh ranked last with around 1 million votes. All the three candidates have congratulated Ebrahim Raisi, as well as President Rouhani, who explicitly congratulated him, but he cautiously waited for the official result and did not mention his name. But he said all the people know who the winner of this election is. The report continues that an interesting number of some 4 million votes were spoiled votes. Ebrahim Raisi's main electoral slogan was a serious move to eradicate corruption in the administration, as corruption and embezzlement were big concerns among people during the past administrations in Iran. His next vow was boosting economy and manufacturing sector. In the judiciary, he revived dozens of factories which were closed due to improper privatization policies by Ahmadinejad and President Rouhani's administrations.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been sworn in for a second term in office. The move by the United Nations General Assembly will keep him in position until 2027. There were 7 other candidates, but none were backed by a UN member state. Chinese President Xi Jinping has congratulated Guterres, saying Beijing expects him to preserve multilateralism and contribute to world peace and development. William Denslow has more from the UN headquarters in New York.
I, Antonio Guterres,
Antonio Guterres was the only recognised candidate, and the UN Security Council recommended his re-election as Secretary General earlier this month.
I'm sure you will continue to lead the United Nations with sincerity and integrity. I would like to highlight your work to prioritize gender parity at the United Nations as a particular example of your efforts to ensure this organization is fit for purpose and reflective of its ideals.
Antonio Guterres began his first term at the start of 2017 with a pledge to make it a year of peace. That didn't go to plan. Several years on, and the Secretary General says the world is at a crossroads.
We are writing our own history with the choices we make right now. It can go either way: breakdown and perpetual crisis, or breakthrough and prospect of a greener, safer and better future for all.
Guterres says serving as the world's top diplomat is an immense privilege and noble duty. UN watchers say he'll have a full plate during his second term in office.
If Guterres doesn't use this window to buck up international cooperation on global warming, it's going to be too late for his successors to reverse the warming trends that are becoming so obvious. He's going to have to try and find ways to balance Beijing and Washington. He's going to have to look for areas where he can bring the great powers together despite overall tensions. And he's going to have to deal with some pretty horrible humanitarian crises.
An immediate priority will be combating the COVID-19 pandemic.
Antonio Guterres says COVID-19 vaccines must be made available for everyone, everywhere. His second term doesn't start until the new year, but the Secretary General says equity in the vaccine rollout needs to start immediately. William Denzelo, CGTN, New York.
Elsewhere, the U.S. Special Representative for the DPRK is in Seoul for talks with South Korean and Japanese officials. It comes after DPRK leader Kim Jong-un said his nation needs to prepare for dialogue and confrontation with the new U.S. administration. Giles Gibson reports from Washington.
The State Department says that Ambassador Sung Kim will emphasize the importance of trilateral cooperation in reaching the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and that he'll be in South Korea until Wednesday next week. The Trump administration worked very closely with South Korea and Japan, but US President Joe Biden has also changed tack since taking over. Former President Donald Trump met with the leader of the DPRK, Kim Jong-un, in person on 2 occasions, but he didn't achieve any meaningful concessions. President Biden, in contrast, has said that he will only meet with Kim if he's prepared to discuss his nuclear arsenal. Now, according to state-controlled media in Pyongyang, Kim said this week that his country is preparing for both dialogue and confrontation with the US, and especially preparing for confrontation. The DPRK tested 2 short-range ballistic missiles in March, but so far this year it hasn't conducted any nuclear or long-range missile tests. However, it's too early to say whether this represents a shift in strategy from the DPRK, because the country conducted nuclear tests in both President Trump and former President Barack Obama's first 12 months in office. Giles Gibson for CGTN in Washington.
Now, China says it's met its goal of eradicating extreme poverty by the end of 2020. Mohammed Azam, who has visited China numerous times in his capacity as a board member of the International Association for Management and of Technology, spoke with Yasser Hakim in Cairo about the significance of China's achievement.
We are in front of a unique achievement in the last 40 years by alleviating poverty to more than 800 million people. This huge challenge was based on the concept of creating jobs through establishing large institutions, then employment through medium companies and small companies that are all linked together in what was called traded clusters. They have formed a whole economic system with each segment complementing the other and creating opportunities that improve the economy and hence living conditions and eradicating poverty. It's a lesson that should be studied worldwide.
What does it mean to eradicate absolute poverty and become a well-off society?
Elevating people out of poverty achieves social security, which means the society is stronger and able to develop more easily. You know that poverty is a threat to peace in any community, and therefore eradicating it is important for the economic and social development of the nation, as well as being competitive globally.
What are the lessons of the Chinese experience that could be learned from Africa?
It is a very important point. Generally, we have to look at the Chinese experience and study it well. We have to benefit from it. Looking at it, China has managed to build a pyramid of competition from the base, which is investment in technology, in education, and updated tech production such as the China 2025 plan to possess the highest developed technology. With time, it has led to the manufacturing of high-quality products to cover local demand, then increase its exports. This reflected on the welfare of the community and the welfare of the citizen. Developing nations, African countries, especially Egypt, have to study this experience closely and adopt what fits to every country.
How can China work with Africa to eradicate poverty in Africa and also help the global efforts?
They have to learn to benefit from the transfer of technology from China and establish more bilateral investments to learn from Chinese experts and technology. Egypt, for instance, is a partner in Chinese initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative and is a founding member of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Just as China created its own China model, every country has to formulate its own model inspired by the China example and adopt from China what is suitable to its own conditions and circumstances, but learning from China will reduce the time and effort for eradicating poverty and become a competitive nation.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
And we're coming up on all the latest from the world of business. Here's what's coming up. Egypt's central bank holds benchmark rates for the 5th straight month.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, Egypt's central bank has kept its key interest rates unchanged during its latest monetary policy committee meeting. The committee kept the overnight lending rate at 9.25% and the overnight deposit rate at 8.25% for a 5th consecutive time. It last cut rates in September and November 2020. The MPC attributed its decision to the most recent annual headline inflation data. Headline inflation rose to 4.8% in May from 4.1% in April. The central bank has a target inflation rate of 7% plus or minus 2% through to the 4th quarter of 2022. It expects inflation to continue to reflect base effects from last year when the pandemic suppressed prices by drastically cutting demand for various goods and services. Elsewhere, Sudan has signed 9 concession agreements for gold and copper mining with 8 local and foreign companies, according to the state news agency SUNA. All the agreements are related to gold mining except one which covers copper, according to the country's minerals minister, Mohamed Bashir Abdallah. 3 companies from Iraq, China and South Africa won 4 gold mining concessions. A 4th firm, one from Armenia, won the single copper concession. 4 local companies took 4 gold concessions. All concession areas are located in the Red Sea State, West Kordofan and Northern State. Moving on, Ethiopia has started construction of a $110 million World Bank-funded dry port expansion in the country's central region. Authorities say the expansion of the Mojo Dry Port, which is being handled by the China Civil Engineering Construction Company Corporation, will modernize logistics in the landlocked country. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has the details.
The China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, through a $110 million loan obtained from the World Bank, is upgrading the Mojo Dry Port. The Ethiopian facility will get an additional 6 warehouses, operating facilities, several roadworks, multi-purpose buildings, parking and greenery. Ethiopia's Transport Minister Dagmawit Moges says the expansion is of paramount importance in modernizing the country's logistics sector.
The purpose of this project is to scale up the capacity of the port as well as change its logistic facility entirely. It will also upgrade the Ethio-Djibouti railway capacity in order to handle the country's ever-increasing import and export endeavors.
The Mojo Dry Port is a key transportation and logistics facilitator between Ethiopia's hinterland and ports in neighboring Djibouti. It is also the logistics hub of the country, and the growth of the port will provide room for the town to advance.
Which is a transformative initiative which comprises comprehensive infrastructure enhancements of the port and associated facilities that are currently not available, such as export consolidation, dry bulk storage, and a multimodal transfer platform to make import-export more seamless.
Mojo Dry Port is located 73 kilometers from the capital Addis Ababa and was established in 2009. Currently, it's the largest inland port in Ethiopia, responsible for over 78% of import and export products in the country. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Now returning to Egypt, where the country will start issuing Sukuk or Sharia-compliant Islamic bonds after the country's parliament granted final approval. Egyptian authorities say Sukuks can help not only bridge the country's fiscal deficit, but also fund much-needed infrastructure investments. As Yasser Hakim now reports, the North African state expects its borrowing needs to rise by over 7% to $68.1 billion.
It's taken more than 6 years to get the green light from Parliament for the government to start issuing the Islamic bonds, commonly known as Sukuk. These are bonds without a fixed interest rate and are linked to projects. Their return fluctuates depending on the project's profits and losses and are guaranteed by state assets, hence described as sovereign bonds.
It's better than conventional loan mechanisms. There will be higher return on investments because the risk is higher. It will attract new sources of foreign direct investment from rich Islamic countries straight into the Sukuk because of the confidence in the Egyptian economy and its performance during the last few years.
The North African country is in the midst of a huge rebuilding process and is constructing new cities, new roads, ports, upgrading infrastructure, transport and railway systems. It needs huge funding, prompting the government to tap into this reclusive $2.7 trillion market. The Sukuk bonds law has been met with several objections before being ratified, mainly because of fears of having to sell Egypt's sovereign assets to bond owners. But the government has moved swiftly to calm those fears. Authorities have denied rumors that it will sell or lease strategic locations such as the Suez Canal or even the Grand Pyramids to issue the Sukuk.
All the information is false. You issue Sukuk on projects that are related to assets, not the asset itself. It has nothing to do with the Suez Canal or High Dam. These are just rumors. The thing is, you establish projects and issue Sukuk as bonds to finance the projects in return for profit sharing. The buyer doesn't have any partnership or ownership in the asset. The buyer only has rights on the revenue and the interest of the project he financed.
The government is set to establish a company that will oversee the state assets and projects to be funded by the Sukuk bonds. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Staying in North Africa, Tunisia is pinning hopes on Eastern European visitors to revive its battered tourism sector. Revenue from the North African nation's vital tourism industry has plunged by more than 60% following a pandemic-induced travel slump. But now, with up to 10 flights a week arriving at its main airport, mostly from Russia and Eastern Europe since May, Tunisian officials are holding out hope for at least 1 million tourists this year. From Tunis, here is CGTN's Adnan Chawashi with the details.
The Tourism and Transport departments in Tunisia have announced that the country has received more than 90 flights from Central and Eastern Europe since the resumption of tourist flights on April 19. 14,000 travelers have visited the country in 3 months. Over 350 tourist flights from Russian, Central and Eastern Europe are scheduled for June.
We have agreed with our partners in the countries that have chosen Tunisia as a destination for the summer holidays to ease the entry and departure procedures. We have respected all conditions to ensure the safety of hotel units and tourist areas. To guarantee the success of this operation, we are working with the Ministries of Transport, ICT, Culture, as well as Environment and Agriculture departments.
The Minister of Tourism and Handicrafts described Tunisia as a COVID-safe tourist destination. Authorities in the North African state say they are expecting hundreds of flights in July.
We are expecting more flights despite the COVID-19 crisis. Tunisia's health protocol has already proved its efficiency. It has been approved by foreign tour operators. We have also launched a digital promotional campaign for the Tunisia destination. After 12 months of uncertainty, we are hoping to revive tourism this season.
The tourism department has put in place a strict health protocol for tourists as well as tourism professionals. The plan has been approved by the scientific committee and the COVID-19 task force.
We have imposed strict enforcement on the health protocol. Our aim is to resume normal activity while protecting lives.
The Office of Civil Aviation and Airports announced that Tunis-Carthage International Airport has received the ACI Airport Health Accreditation awarded by the Airports Council International. The accreditation is granted to airports which apply the proper international standards against the spread of the coronavirus. Tunisia has launched the COVID-19 vaccination campaign for tourism professionals across the country. The inoculation campaign is aimed at jump-starting the vital tourism industry, which has been battered by the pandemic. Adnan Chawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Stay with us as we take another short break. There's plenty more still to come on Africa Live.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, budding South African artist Zandile Shabalala is reshaping the fine arts scene by focusing her work on women of color. Inspired by artists who dignified images of black people throughout history, the young painter made her debut with an exhibition in Ghana. Shabalala is still completing her degree at home while her work is gaining interest around the world. She spoke to CGTN's Julie Shire.
I
grew up with my mom and my grandmother and my little brother, and the household was very warm, very dominated by women. I just knew that I wanted to be like a very independent, very strong woman. I think of myself in a way as a storyteller. My work is centered around women and the experience of women. When I make a body of work or just a painting, I'm usually very focused on the narrative to just centralize and put Black people at the front, especially within the visual arts space. It's such a long overdue thing that we just embrace our Blackness and who we are as Africans. The works are very bold and very confident, and I think that's one of the things that I want my audience to receive. I have a painting titled Self-Portrait, Zandile, and it's just my favorite. It was inspired by Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. I think of it as the Black Mona Lisa. It's not so much to take away from Mona Lisa, but to just embrace the beauty that is me. My first solo exhibition was with ADA Contemporary, a gallery that was founded last year by a woman from Ghana, Adora Mba. It was so important for me that my first big show happens within Africa, even though it's not South Africa, but still within the continent. The title of the exhibition was Enter Paradise. The idea around it was to sort of like engage with the term paradise, but not in a very common way that we've sort of learned to engage with it, that is like very green trees and everything. I instead wanted to focus on the paradises that are present within our own space, and seeing that we all spend so much time at home. So the exhibition had images of women just in their spaces, but it was contrasted with images of an installation of foliage and clouds and everything that was very lush and paradisey. And currently I have my second solo exhibition in Germany titled Beautiful Experiments. For the remainder of the year I do have things that I'm planned. I can't really say much about them, but they will be happening in different parts of the world. I think there is quite a demand for the works, both internationally and nationally. If someone buys a painting, I hope that it inspires the person, especially if the collector is a woman, to just not be afraid to be bold and leading.
And here's what's coming up in the sport. South African long jumper Luvo Manyonga handed 4-year ban for anti-doping rule violation.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours?